Hi, everybody, and welcome to another installment of Align's Daily Dose of Advice, our way of bringing you valuable insights and thought leadership from business experts from around the world on various topics that will hopefully help you and your business. My name is Eugene Turk, and I'm the VP of Business Development at Align, and my guest today is Bill Gallagher. Bill is a highly experienced executive, entrepreneur, and business coach. He has helped thousands of CEOs, C-suite executives, and leadership teams realize their visions for a better world. And he also is the host of the popular Scaling Up Business podcast. Bill, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thanks for having me on.
I think most of us have heard the saying that revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is king. Cash, and perhaps more importantly, cash flow, is obviously the oxygen that fuels business. However, there are companies, probably many companies out there right now, whose cash flow may have been significantly reduced, perhaps even all the way to zero. So, with
For
that
sure.
backdrop, I was hoping that you could share some advice for companies who might be facing a cash crunch as they sort of look out over the next few months on the horizon. Um, to start, I know that you obviously have had a number of businesses over the years, and of course, had the experience of going through other crises, such as the financial recession in 2008 and 2009.
Yeah.
Any particular wisdoms that you gained or that you learned from having gone through that that might be informative or applicable to others who are in a similar position now?
Well, I think there's a lesson from each of the different recessions and their flavors and the businesses I was running at the time from each of them. But maybe a really useful one to start off with today is what happened 2008, 2009. So 2008, 2009, I was running a jewelry company. It's a business my wife started. We had a designer, we actually still in the business, a line of designer jewelry that sold in hundreds of stores around the country on television, cable, on catalogs, that kind of thing. So popular designer brand of jewelry, lovely department store sales. And in 2008, with the fall of the market and the seriousness that the economy that went along with it, people stopped buying jewelry for themselves. Like our business evaporated overnight, not to nothing, but down to an unsustainable point, like maybe three quarters, 75% down in a very rapid fashion. And it looked like, we were headed for something profound, and there was all kinds of conversation, if you remember at the time. Um, and it was unclear what we could do or what we could create out of it. And so the first thing that we had to do was go get the cash in order. And we hadn't done, like the jack stack moved and built up a fortress balance sheet. We weren't prepared for the downturn in spite of some of the advice that advisors had given me at the time. So I didn't know if I had a business. I didn't know if I'd keep my house. I didn't know if I'd be facing a personal bankruptcy, like any of that. But I knew I was interested in keeping it and doing something and pivoting in that. But the first thing I had to do was get the cash under control and find some room to breathe. You said cash is the oxygen that the business runs on. You can't last long at all without cash. Another friend said, profit is an opinion. Which is an interesting perspective. Like from an accounting standpoint, there are a lot of things that you can do to make the profit appear different, and even legally, like businesses do all the time, to adjust it slightly. But cash is a fact, right? You can't pay your suppliers, your employees, that kind of thing with profit. You pay them with the cash that you have, which is a function of profit, but it's what you actually are in control of. So there I am. It doesn't look like I have anything. So what I did right away is I went around and I started making big asks of people. I made very radical requests of people. I went to my landlord and said, I don't know if I have a business, but I'm committed to resurrecting this business and pivoting and going on. And we're in a bad space and I need something ridiculous. I need no rent for like the next year or until something changes. And he looked at me, he gulped. He said, you're asking a lot. I said, it's not personal. I don't feel entitled to it. I'm not owed it. You could sue me. You're well within your rights, right? And here's what it would look like. And I laid it out. And I said, and that's not a threat. That's just like painting the picture of, I don't think you should do that. It's not in either of our interest. It would be painful for me, and you'll end up with nothing or almost nothing. So I laid it out for him, and the I was looking over some talks and things I did back in those days. A recession is a terrible thing to waste, was one, and he said yes. So he gave me a year of free rent or until I stopped needing it. And he asked me to do quarterly reviews of the finances to show my numbers every quarter to demonstrate it was still needed. And he asked me for a 2-year extension with increases so that at the end of the term that, so he's already renewing me, right? And then he asked me not to waive any particular rights in the event that we ended up in bankruptcy. He wanted to be able to still, act against it if things didn't go well. And it was all fine with me. So that was one of the first ones that I did. But then I went to all kinds of suppliers and I said, look, I can't pay you for the stuff in arrears, but I'll pay you for everything going forward. And I need some terms, and I need help. Like I'll work with you together and I'll find ways to give this back. And I went to lots and lots of people. I went to staff, I went to everybody, and I made really big requests of people. You could call them radical requests. I like to call them radical requests. And that's probably the thing that we didn't uh, talk about, that people aren't doing, is sharing the pain. I just didn't feel like it was my responsibility to share, to carry all the load of all the financial pressure at that time. The banks, the landlords, everybody would share in this, and we would win together, right? Or lose. And we came out really well. Like within a year, we had pivoted, and that's another story. But the key was that making really big asks of people.
And so that's a perfect segue to the next question. And so, what are, obviously, rent relief is one example. What are some
Yeah,
other examples of those radical asks or
right,
radical requests
right.
that companies should be considering at a time like this in order to conserve some cash, or at least uh, not have as much expense right now, which might help their cash flow?
Well, you've got all of your operating expense. And in that category, you've got the admin staff and you've got your office expense. And that could be a lot or a little, depending. And then you've got your direct labor costs, depending on the kind of business you're in. And you've got all your supplier, your cost of sales, cost of goods, those kinds of things. So those are the big cash outlays. And I went to people and I asked mostly, not so much for the cost of goods like discounts. I asked for terms, and some of my existing suppliers gave me great terms, and but quite a few said, no, we're in trouble too, we can't help you. And then new suppliers or people that had a very small piece of my business offered me huge things. Like one guy gave me, he said, you could have 90 to 180-day terms and I'll give you a $5 million line of credit, and you just have to promise a couple of things to me going forward on your honor. And I did, and I kept that, and he helped us get through. And other people said, uh, you know whatever, we're not, do your best. And I had one person tell me, oh, you come from a very wealthy country, just go to your banks and borrow money, and we can't do that. And I'm like, okay. And I gave business to everyone else. So that was the kind of shift that was going on in that time frame. So suppliers, but even employees, where I would ask them to give me concessions in their take-home pay but I would give it to them on the win later and find ways to make it up. And quite a few did, and mostly we were in the same position, so we fought through it together. When I was coming from a place of, we'll win and work through this together, and I need your partnership, and I was honest and not manipulative or trying to get over on people, it went really well.
And so that sort of leads into the next question, is that for companies that aren't in the, there are other, obviously, companies that are in a very enviable position that have large cash reserves, and they can
Yes.
sort of
Yes.
um, ride the storm out and sort of
Yeah.
see what happens, and maybe even take advantage of opportunities that might
Yes.
come when we get through this.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's also many companies that don't have the benefit of having large cash reserves. What
Yes.
should they be doing right now?
The vast majority of companies don't have large reserves, so you've got to figure out how to buy yourself some room to breathe and maneuver. The one thing, so there's a lot of talk about the CARES Act and the loans and things available. When I think back about what happened to our business in 2001, we actually had three businesses in those days. In As the dot-com era ended in 2001 and September 11th happened and that kind of thing, and we ended up closing two and focusing on one business in that time frame. But we borrowed money and we used our line of credit. We went into it, and the problem with that is that we kicked that can down the road a little bit. So it was a couple of years later that I faced the near collapse of the business that time and had to ditch and jettison things and so on. But at that time, it was far less sympathetic. Like, people weren't looking at us like, "Oh, we're in this together, 2001," you know. No, now it was a couple of years later, and they're like, "You're an idiot CEO." Right. So that was a different. It felt very different in terms of getting through it. The time to act is right now. Cut much deeper than you think. Get creative. Ask big things of people. Right.
You mentioned the CARES Act. I know that you're not necessarily a certified financial planner or a CPA,
Not even
um,
close.
but and obviously there's all sorts of conflicting information that comes out on a daily
Yes.
basis
Yeah.
about the CARES Act and
Yeah.
what loans are available, who's
Right.
eligible for what.
Right.
What are you telling your clients about the economic stimulus benefits that are out there from at least the U.S. government for small businesses?
So anywhere where there's like free money and guarantees and forgivable things and whatever, like, go get it. Somebody was telling me today, he's like, "Oh, I applied for the thing and I got the $10,000 grant. Great, use that." And but then he's like, "Oh, and I'm getting a $500,000 line or long-term loan." I'm like, "Don't use that, or think really hard about using that." So if you borrow money to fill a big loss that you've got now, and who knows, are we going to be 2 months, 3 months, a year of dealing with this? How deep will it go? I don't know. You might have a strong opinion. I've heard people tell me we're going to have a sharp V recovery and there's going to be a great snapback. And other people tell me we're headed for something greater than the Great Depression. I don't know. And I think it'll vary by country and region and so on. I'm not going to call that, but I would rather do the difficult things now and hold on only to the most essential strategic assets, whether they be people or technology or resources, and then begin to look at how to experiment. So buy myself breathing room to maneuver now. And it's not your job again to make everyone else right and you be the one left holding the thing. Your banks, your credit card companies, all those people charge big fees and they assess the risk all the time, and you're all in this together. I'm not saying get over on people and trick people. It's far from my DNA. What I am saying is, don't spare everyone else and be the only one to shoulder the burden here.
So we're at our final question, which is
Yeah.
not limited to cash, and it's really just what is the number one piece of advice that you are giving your clients right now?
So this is the thing that I think is, start making really radical requests. And the way to make a radical request is to set aside your fear. We're all afraid people will react to us in a variety of different ways. We're afraid they'll get emotional, they'll do whatever. So you got to confront that. You could role play it. You could script it out. You could work on, what are the big asks that you could make a list of big asks now, and then all the things that you're afraid somebody would say if you ask those, why those are ridiculous asks that you would make of people. Script it out and then start to knock down the big ones, and work down that list and get huge concessions. If you come from a place of partnership, if you have a deep empathy for what you're asking of people and what it means in their world, but you ask it anyway because you also know that they're big, adult business people that can work with you together and will appreciate your loyalty. Think about the landlord example. It's far more expensive and difficult for them to try to refill an empty office or retail space later than it is to keep you and help you get over the hump. And the loyalty and the commitment that you'll have to each other is worth way more than them kicking you or suing you or whatever. And look, everybody's in the same position. So what are they going to do?
Yeah, now is the time to go bold.
Yeah, so just have a deep empathy and regard for what you're asking of people, but also who they are and what they're capable of and what your team is all about and this business that you've been running and are passionate about. You come from a deep respect for all of that at the same time and ask something that's way out of your comfort zone. that'll get you unbelievable results.
Great advice, Bill, as always. Thank you so much for joining us. If you would like to learn more about Bill, you can do so at his website at scalingcoach.com. As I mentioned earlier, he is also the host of the Scaling Up Business podcast, which I'm sure you can find at all of the various sources for podcasts on the internet. If you'd like to learn more about Align or the Scaling Up Scoreboard software, please check out aligntoday.com or scalingup.com/software. And we hope you will join us next time. Till then, thanks so much, and I hope you make it a great day.